Welcome to Brain Strength. This is a series where this average Joe teaches you a thing or two about sports psychology. I'm your host, RJ Lynch, and with my master's in sports psychology, let's get this thing on the road. In this episode, we're going to be focusing on the idea of resilience, that bounce back, comeback, the thing we all love to see. We love our comeback kings and queens. So let's see how we get it done. So resilience is the ability to cope, adapt, and bounce back from situations that did not go well, from failures, mistakes, injuries, things like that, and continue to keep on going. It's staying positive and focused regardless of the situation and always thinking you can come back and win this. And resilience relies on 7 C's: confidence, competency, connection, character, contribution, coping, and control. A quick highlight those and how they relate. So competence, you have to know what you're doing and have some skill in the technique to be able to come back. If this is your first time ever playing football, basketball, hockey, and you make a lot of mistakes, you don't have the necessary skill set to bounce back for it. You can still have a growth mindset or so and believe you can learn from it, but you really have nothing to bounce back from because you know, like, I am what I am. I'm not going to adapt because I can't change things. So first you have to have the skill to come back before you can have bounce back ability. Then you have to have confidence. You have to believe that you do have the skill. So there's having the skill, and then there's belief that you can do it, or belief that you are able to come back and do things. Resilience is big in injury recovery because you have to have that self-belief that I can come back from this injury and be just as good. And then as you do all the other things, you do the drills, you gain the confidence and the ability to actually use your knee correctly, it becomes a lot easier. Next is connection. So one of the biggest things about our ability to cope, to deal with difficult situations, is our social support. How do we connect with other people? People who come back from injuries a lot of times have friends, family, teammates, coaches they're very connected from are giving their 100% to help them. And when you have 100 people at your back standing with you, it's a lot easier to come back than when you think you have to do things alone. From a team perspective, if your team's rallied together and connected, as they're down big, they're going to have a better chance of getting back up. If they're infighting and hate each other, why would you want to come back? You don't want to go tooth and nail, fight to the death for that person because you don't like them. The next piece is character. You just have to have good character and a quality human being to bounce back. Because people who kind of suck as human beings, a lot of times are very fixed in their mindset. And when they see things going wrong, they don't think they can learn and adapt to them. Whereas the person who's positive, has good character, is growth oriented, they're going to think, all right, I made these mistakes, but I can adapt, I can learn, I can do better. Because there's a reason you're down big. There's a reason you're hurt. There's a reason that things are going on. And you have to think, I can adapt to these mistakes. I can learn from them, and I can come back in the second half, in the fourth quarter, whatever it is, make the necessary changes, and do the right thing. Contribution, this comes from a bit of that social support piece as well. Everybody contributing to a goal, working together. This one's more from a team perspective. Then you have coping. When you're down big, when things are going wrong, it's very easy to get down on yourself, become stressed, feel a lot of pressure on yourself, and you have to be able to deal with it. You have to be able to use those positive self-talk statements. You have to be able to use that mindfulness to get over the stress and the anxiety so that you can bounce back. If you're stuck in that hole of negativity, you're never going to be able to focus on the things that need to be done to make the comeback. And then lastly, you have to have an accurate sense of control. And this is both understanding what you can control and what you can't. If you can't control the fact that it's rainy, the field sucks, the turf is miserable to run on, everybody's slipping, you can't control that. And you have to understand that. So when you're making the comeback, you can't focus on, well, I'm going to be slipping less, because you don't know. What you can focus on is your effort, what you do, what you're paying attention to, how you're coping. If you focus on those things, it's going to be a lot easier to come back versus trying to focus in on the refs and how they're making their calls or what your teammates are doing. So understanding what you can control and what you can't, and then focusing on what you can just allows you to come back easier. So I've talked a little bit about the resilience in those 7 C's, but just kind of going over what a resilient athlete looks like first and not one. Resilience, optimistic and positive. The one lacking in resilience is negative. They don't think they can come back. They don't think their mistakes can be changed. They're just stuck there. Resilient person is persistent. They're going to keep trying until they win, until they succeed. They're patient with it. Whereas the person who's lacking resilience, they're easily discouraged. Something goes wrong and they're like, oh, well, we're done. It's over, without ever trying back. Someone who's already resilient, they bounce back quickly. Playing basketball or hockey and you turn it over through a bad mistake that goes the other way and the other team scores. Are you able to shift from that play to next play? I can't change what I did there, but I can change what I'm doing now and going forward. So you're able to shift over there quickly and make those changes. If you have no resilience, you focus on that mistake for so long instead of being over here in what's happening now. You're adaptable if you're resilient. You're able to recognize where you're making mistakes, and then you change or do some critical thinking to figure out how you're going to fix them on the fly. Someone who does not, they're thrown off by anything new. When challenges come, they're kind of stuck. They stay in what they're doing, and they keep getting beat down until they just finally give up. Finally, the resilient athlete's focused. They're focused on the present and what they're doing now because that's all they can do. You can't change the future or the past. You can only do now, and that's what they're going to focus on. Whether they make the full comeback or not, they're focused on doing everything now to make it versus what got them there. And then lastly, for the non-resilient person, they're not focused or they have poor emotional control. Because their mistakes are happening, they're not focusing on that. They're focused on how angry they are, how sad, depressed, and they just spiral. So quickly on to our science bits. What makes resilience? What does it look like? What are things that go into it? First one is psychological hardiness. Hardiness is a personality trait that helps view stress as growth or opportunities to grow. It's part of that fixed versus growth mindset. And it's your ability to handle mistakes and stresses. It comes down to your commitment, control, and challenges. Next up is called the broaden and build theory. It's this idea that positive emotions, positivity, encourages us to explore. If we are positive about what's going on, about our mistakes, we explore them a little bit deeper, and then we are able to grow and build upon them and build resources. So if we're willing to explore why we're angry or why we're stressed with a touch of positivity, the touch of just kind of that neutral mindfulness feel, we're able to recognize what causes us to feel that way and build things up so that we don't feel that way anymore. And then lastly is resilience theory at its core. And it has 4 pieces. Exposure. We have to do things where we fail, where we get knocked down at. We have to be engaged in what we're doing. We actually have to care about it before we're going to make that bounce back. Then we have to adapt. If we failed, we want to not fail. We want to be good at what we're doing. So now we adapt and we learn how to do things differently, and then we just grow so that we don't fail to begin with next time. So what would I, as a mental performance pro, do to help an athlete build some resilience to be better at that comeback? First thing might be thought tracking and replacing. One of the big reasons, as you might have picked up on here, is how we view things, how we talk to ourselves. So if we're always using negative self-talk when we're down in games, when we're losing, when we're doing things poorly, we're never going to improve. So I'll have people track negative self-talk, when it happens, what they're feeling, what they're thinking at that time. And then we're going to come up with ideas of how to replace it or how to stop that thought and replace it with something different. With that, the next piece is the hang it up drill. So when you have mistakes, I don't want you to completely ignore them because they're growing opportunities, they're learning moments. So we'll create little phrases such as hang it up, end of game, whatever it is, just remind them, instead of focusing on the mistake I just made, that turnover I had, can I hang it up until after the game? And the reason I use hang it up is I like to think of negative thoughts as things that we can just hang in our locker. So when you're playing, you don't wear your street clothes or the normal stuff you have on. You put all that baggage in your locker. So as things happen throughout the game, I want you to take all the baggage that's there. I want you to hang it up in your locker so we can deal with it after. Next up is outlook work. So we might do some stuff on our growth first fix mindset. More importantly, I'm going to take a look at that control element. So I like creating circles of control. On one element, you have the narrow center of the things you can control, then the slightly bigger circle of things you can influence, to the things that you can't control on the outside. So things you can't control are going to look like the weather, the referees. Things you might be able to influence might be how your teammates play, the play call, whatever it is. Then what you control is effort, attitude, things like that. And then lastly, mindfulness. If you can become aware of thoughts and learn how to let them pass through acceptance, as things go wrong, you're going to be able to accept that they went wrong, and you're going to be able to jump back in and hit that next play. For coaches, what would I have them do to help their athlete build resilience? First thing is reflection, ownership. So at the end of games, at the end of practices, have them reflect on the things they did well and the things they did wrong, but have them own up to what they did wrong and have them create goals of how are we going to get better for next week. And this doesn't just have to be technique. It can also be you were really negative during practice today. Own up to that. How can we get better at it so that you're not negative next time and bringing the mood down of all your teammates? Next up, create unique challenges both in your sport and out. So put them in situations where it's okay to fail, so that they can go through that exposure, engagement, adapt, grow phase. If you're always in controlled situations where failure is not going to happen a lot, when it happens in games, you're not going to be able to know how you respond or how you should respond. You're just going to respond however you're going to do it. So you have to be put in situations to fail, and that's partially on the coach. With that, we have encourage failure through novelty. So doing random drills, random things. Maybe it's teams having a tough time with free throws. So for one day, you just have them shoot with their opposite hand. You know it's going to go wrong. You know it's not going to go great. But by having them focus on doing their free throws with the other hand, doing it slower, it forces them to think a lot more on what they're doing. So even though they're failing, they might get upset with that. So then you address, why are you upset with this? You're never going to shoot like this in game. Just focus on the small improvements you can make with it and see how that can translate over here. And then lastly, mentorship programs. Freshmen, young athletes, whoever it is, they might not know what it's like to actually fail, to do things wrong. If you're a college coach and you coach a D1 program, but not a great D1 program, here's what happens. You have kids come in that were the best at their school, probably the best at their conference if they're playing D1. They're some of the best athletes around. They don't know what failure's like. And then they come to your team where they're not the best team, and they're going to fail. So putting them with athletes that you trust, that you think respond very well to failure, who adapt and grow very well, are very resilient, having them pair up together so that the young athlete can see how they respond, can talk to that person about what you did wrong or how to respond better. All those things are just going to help that athlete develop through someone they're going to trust and probably respect. So that's all I have for today. If you have more questions, send us a comment or email through our website. If you want more of this stuff, like and subscribe, give us a follow. And until next time, if there's anything I said today that you found offensive or didn't like, I hope you can forgive me. If there's anything in the comments you say that I find offensive, no, I'll forgive you. Brain strength, out.